4 layers of fluffy almond cake, fresh berry jam, and a mascarpone filling. This berry mascarpone cake is quite possibly my favorite recipe of all time. This cake is also known as the Berry Chantilly cake, and it is truly one of the most delicious recipes in cakes that I've ever tried. Hi everyone, this is Rima from Cake It To Me, and let's get started on this cake. The first component of this cake is the berry jam. Now you could certainly buy your own, but I just think fresh made jam is so much better for this cake. You make the jam by first adding cut strawberries, sugar, and water to a pot and turning the heat on high. You could also use frozen berries. I've used them in the past and the jam still turns out great. Once the water starts to simmer, then you can add your blueberries and raspberries. The reason why we add these after is because they don't need as much time to cook. Now you're going to turn up the heat, give the mixture a stir, and wait for it to boil. The great thing about this jam is that it can be made well in advance. I made mine 2 days before, and for me, this jam stores really well in the fridge up to a month. Once the mixture has come to a rapid boil, turn the heat down, give it a stir, and reduce it until it starts to look thickened. After that, you're going to take a masher and try to mash the berries as much as possible. At this point, you could also use a stick blender, but I like having some whole berry pieces, and so I think this method works the best. Then you're going to wait for this mixture to reduce by about half in volume. You can do this by turning up the heat. For me, this took about 5 to 10 minutes. While waiting for the jam to reduce, we're going to zest and juice a whole lemon. After about 5 to 10 minutes, the jam will start looking a little bit thicker. It's okay if it still looks a little bit watery. It's going to get a little bit thicker when we cool it down. At this point, you just want to turn off your heat, add your lemon zest, as well as your lemon juice. I'm also adding a little bit of strawberry emulsion to this jam. This ingredient is totally optional, but I find that it really enhances the flavor of the jam. Once your jam mixture is ready, you're just going to add it to a bowl and refrigerate it until it's completely cool. I usually do mine a day or 2 before and just leave it in the fridge. Now we can move on to making the cakes. As always, we're going to start by preheating our oven to 350 degrees. Then it's time to combine the dry ingredients. To a sifter, we're going to add all-purpose flour, sugar, salt, baking powder, and baking soda. Once you have all those combined, go ahead and sift those ingredients together. I often get asked if sifting is an important process, and this is a really good example of why it is important. So as you can see at the end of my sifting, there's some clumps left, and if I didn't push them through with a spoon, they would be left into big clumps that'll be in the batter, and that's just not really tasty. Next up is the butter. We're adding softened butter directly to the flour in a method that's known as the reverse creaming method. And what this does is it just coats the flour with butter so that the gluten doesn't develop too much in the cake batter and we get a light, fluffy cake. I usually add these ingredients directly to my automatic stand mixer, but I wanted to show you that it can be done with a hand mixer and even just a spatula. You just want to make sure that the butter is very evenly incorporated in the flour, and once it is, it's going to have the texture of crumbly sand. Once you have that ready to go, we can move on to the wet ingredients. We're going to add some water, some vegetable oil, eggs, almond extract, and last but not least, our sour cream. Then whisk the batter for 2 minutes by the timer. Take a spatula and just wipe down the sides of the bowl to make sure everything is incorporated evenly and there's no flour left behind. Then I'm going to divide the batter evenly into 3 6-inch cake pans. If you don't have a scale to evenly divide the batter, one good trick is to use a cup measurer and use that to divide the batter into your pans. Once that's done, we're just going to pop them in the oven for approximately 40 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. My cakes took about 40 minutes to bake, and as you can see when I insert a toothpick, there's no wet batter left behind, so I know that they're done. About 10 minutes after the cakes come out of the oven, I just like to take my spatula and run it along the edges of the cake just to make sure that when I do take out the cakes that they'll come out cleanly. And once you do this, you just want to set the cakes aside for at least an hour to 2 hours just to make sure that they're completely at room temperature before we start decorating and frosting them. I'm also making my cakes in advance, so after they're done cooling, I'm just going to cover them in saran wrap and freeze them until I need to assemble the cake. Next up is making the mascarpone filling. For that, we're going to start with a little bit of gelatin. You could also use pectin if that's what you have on hand. You just want to add the gelatin to a little bit of water to let it bloom. And this just helps the gelatin absorb a little bit of water before we add it to our filling. Then we're just going to add some heavy cream, powdered sugar, pure vanilla extract, and almond extract to a really cold bowl. And we're going to whip it until stiff peaks form. Halfway through whisking the heavy cream, you're going to add your bloom gelatin to the mixture, and this is going to help create those stiff peaks and eventually just create a mousse. After about 5 minutes of whisking, you should have stiff peaks, and you'll know it's ready when the ribbons on the side of the bowl start to hold their shape. Once the whipped cream is ready, we can start incorporating the mascarpone cheese. In a separate bowl, we're going to have our mascarpone cheese, and we're going to combine that with a little bit of cream cheese as well. Stir those two ingredients together until you get an even mixture. Next, you're going to take a little bit of your whipped cream and add it to your cheese mixture. This needs to be done with a spatula, and it needs to be folded in so that we can combine the light texture of the heavy whipping cream with the flavors of the mascarpone and the cream cheese. Once the small amount of whipped cream has been combined with the cheeses, you can add the entire mixture to the whipped cream bowl. And again, you're going to continue folding in the heavy whipping cream into the cheese mixture. This filling is so flavorful, and it adds such a light texture to the cake that makes it feel like you're eating a cloud. Once everything is mixed, go ahead and put a saran wrap on top and chill the filling for about 1 to 2 hours. I usually make my filling a day or two in advance as well. That way when it comes to assembling the cake, everything goes by really quickly. The last thing you'll need for this cake is a batch of my Italian meringue buttercream. Once you have that made, you're going to add about a teaspoon of strawberry extract. I'm using a strawberry emulsion here. If you can't find strawberry emulsion, you can add a little bit of mixed jam to your frosting, or you could also add almond extract with a little bit of pink food coloring. The strawberry emulsion that I'm using does have a little bit of pink coloring, but just to deepen the color of the frosting a little bit, I'm adding a touch of purple gel food color as well. Once all your flavors and colors are mixed into the frosting, it's time to assemble the cake. Add some buttercream to a reusable piping bag. This helps with the cake assembly, and you'll see that in a little bit. One cool item that I use to assemble my cakes is a reusable acrylic cake board. This helps me avoid any cardboard waste and allows me to reuse the cake board again and again for multiple cakes. To start assembling the cake, you're going to add a little bit of frosting to the bottom and then put on your first layer. This helps act as a glue to hold down the first layer of the cake to the cake board. Then using the buttercream in the piping bag, you're going to create a circle around the cake to hold in the filling. Add and spread your jam, and then add and spread your filling. You can reinforce the border by adding a second circle of buttercream to hold in the filling if you need to. We're just going to repeat this process again for the 3 layers. After adding the final layer, we're going to coat all sides of the cake with the Italian meringue buttercream. This first layer of frosting is called the crumb coat, and it doesn't have to be perfect at all. All we're doing here is just locking in the crumbs so that we can decorate easily afterwards. After putting on the first coat of buttercream, we're just going to chill the cake for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to finish the cake with a second layer of buttercream. And just to add a little decorative touch, I'm using my cake comb and adding a decorative border that way. I will have another video on how to get clean edges with a cake comb, so be on the lookout for that. I love using a cake comb because I can still get a really pretty look without having to worry about straight, neat edges. If you do decide to use a cake comb to decorate your cake, just be really patient with it and go around the cake several times until you get a nice pretty border. And last but not least, you just want to take your spatula and pull in the edges of the top of your cake for a nice smooth finish on the top. After the cake is decorated, I top the entire thing with a lot of berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and just for a finishing touch, I added some edible violas from my garden. I also just lifted up the cake using my acrylic cake board and put it on a really pretty cake stand, and then put more berries and flowers at the bottom as well. This is probably my most popular cake recipe, and I've made it so many times. Here is a look at the final cake. As good as it looks, it tastes even better. The almond cake is really fluffy and light, and the filling is just so delicious combined with the fresh berry jam. I hope you give this recipe a try. If you like this recipe video, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment. Thanks for visiting Cake It To Me.